You're listening to Shoe In, covering the ins and outs of all things footwear, from sneakers to heels, loafers to slippers, and every type of shoe in between. Brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. And now your footwear insiders, Matt Priest and Andy Polk.
Welcome back to the Shoe In Show, the show that never ends.
It never ends. It's always there at shoeinshow.com, Andy.
There is a lot going on in the footwear industry, and we're just trying to ride the bull and figure out what's happening. And
8 seconds, man. It's all it takes to be a winner.
Well, this episode's going to last a little bit longer than that, hopefully. But
8,000 seconds.
Hopefully they don't drop off after 8 seconds, right?
They're already gone.
Yeehaw! Dong, 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 dong. Folks, this is a Shoe In Show. We're covering all things on the footwear industry, all the business trends, trying to peel back the layers to get to the operations and
Peel
the
it back,
decisions
baby.
that all the major companies have to make and struggle with. And, hopefully by having these conversations, we can strengthen companies and make more winners.
I love it, Andy. I love things I don't
Winning.
love. You know what there is so much of these days? It's content. There's so much engagement. There's so much noise that I almost kind of wish I was back in an analog world just for a day, just to kind of refresh my brain, right?
Tron.
That seems like an overly digital world. That's where we're headed, Andy.
Well, it's a digital world that's analog.
Digital.
Did I just blow your mind?
You did. All I want to do is play with the glowing discs, play some Frisbee golf with those. Nevertheless, one of the things that we did recently was sit down with a number of different executives to talk about how we are revolutionizing consumer engagement in the digital world.
Okay.
This was during our 2018 Executive Summit, our
I remember.
Business Summit.
Is that the one where we had 200 attendees, all the major executives from all the major brands across the entire industry?
That's the one.
Wow.
Yeah, man. We were there too, so
it was probably the largest footwear summit over the last couple of years.
Easily. Yeah, no, absolutely. And we were exploring all kinds of things. We got such great feedback. We had Dick Johnson there. We had the guys from Axios. We had Tiffany Beers, formerly of Nike, so on and so forth. But one of the things I really enjoyed was talking to Dwayne Edwards, who's the founder of the Pinsole Academy in Portland, Sara Irvani, who's CEO of Okabashi Brands as a factory in Georgia, Dr. John Puterbaugh, who's the managing director of Blue Soho, and Jeff Hunt, who's the founder and CEO of Snap 36. Each of these folks operate different segments of our industry, the digital side, the design side, the manufacturing side, and they each had a unique perspective on how we should strategize to engage with consumers in an ever increasingly noisy world.
Well, I like noise sometimes, but I'm with you. It can be a little bit much, and I think the idea is how can you cut through that noise to give an authentic message? How can you cut through that noise to help them see that the quality of your product?
Yeah.
And how can you be authentic in doing all of that? And if you're authentic, it cuts back on the noise. Then it's not noise, actually. It's a value to what you're trying to grab, you know?
Yeah.
So you're right. There's a lot of marketing hype out there, and it's how can you get beyond that hype to actually be honest and true about your product and honest and true about yourself. So I'm excited to post up the conversation that we had at the summit that we got such great feedback on.
We had a
and
digital recording device there to pick up all the conversation.
yeah, hopefully our listeners don't go analog because they'll never hear us again.
That's right.
And with that, we'll go ahead and tee up the panel.
So we're going to go ahead and get started with the second half of our day, and I have been debating whether I stand up there, whether I sit down. Since I'm such a giant, I'm going to Phil Donahue it and stand down here as if I'm hosting a talk show, and I think that'll help kind of keep the conversation going. I can't thank you enough. You each come from different perspectives, different brands, and different journeys in the shoe industry, and I think hopefully as we make our way through this conversation, we'll have the opportunity to hear more about the way in which the consumer engagement in this space that we are in is changing very rapidly. And so with that, why don't we just go down, we'll start with Dwayne, just like the Axios guy said, 2 sentences about who you are and what you do.
Wow, 2 sentences. So Dwayne Edwards, former footwear designer. Now I consider myself a farmer.
Love it. Jeff.
Let me see. Is that on? All right, great. Jeff Hunt, founder, CEO of Snap 36. We're creating user experiences in digital e-commerce for online shopping and changing the way people engage with products.
That was a run-on. I love it. Love it. Sarah, you're up next.
Hello, my name. Is it on?
I think so.
Hello, I'm Sara Irvani, CEO of Okabashi Brands. We are a sustainable American footwear manufacturer, and I think that's one sentence.
That was good. You nailed it.
That was good.
John?
John Puterbaugh, Managing Director of Blue Soho, which is a turnkey agency. My background quickly is from building a lot of early mobile apps. So built the first South Park app, the Daily Show app. So been using mobile to connect print and digital for a long time.
So you come from somewhat outside the industry. So John, I'll kick this question off to you first. What do you think is the biggest challenge that we face in the digital world? Consumers have more power and are more educated than ever before. They're more distracted. How do you keep them focused? What do you think works and doesn't work? Tell us kind of 3 things we need to be thoughtful of when it comes to consumer engagement.
All right, that's a lot of stuff. So
Two sentences.
That was a run-on sentence.
You're a quick learner.
And you can only answer in 2 sentences. Just kidding.
So, I've been very excited. So we're an agency inside of a printer. So a lot of our customers are brick and mortar retailers. And so we found that a lot of people, it's been well publicized that people are wasting a lot of money on digital advertising with the big walled gardens and programmatic online. But we've put a lot of attention on how do you use digital to get people to go in store, and then how do you use digital to make the in-store experience better. And so what I'm particularly excited about is this area of, I guess people are calling it phygital, or just the hybrid environments where your physical things now can control digital. So for example, your direct mail, the post office can tell you exactly when each piece is going to arrive at people's houses now. So you can plug into the post office and then use that physical event to drive digital experiences. Similarly, as you see the pop-up displays over here, we've had very effective in retail environments of doing these on-demand promotional campaigns that use, and you don't need the high-tech digital touchscreens. If you put interesting print components with digital contextual content, you can create really interesting in-store experiences. So we've had a lot of success, particularly in the grocery space, on doing refreshes and grand openings and really bringing to life the private label stuff. And so I think the last thing I would just point out is, you wouldn't think about it, but a lot of the innovation is actually happening in grocery with the private label, and certainly personalization. The most personalized direct marketing, multi-channel campaigns are coming out of the grocers, and it's often overlooked. So we're trying to kind of bridge that and bring that to other retail partners.
Got it. Now, Dwayne, let's pivot to you. You've been in the business 30 years. I think you have over 40 patents as a designer. You launched the world-renowned Pinsole Design Footwear Academy based in Portland, Oregon. I've heard you talk about how consumers are now the creators. Mm-hmm. How do you envision, both from your perspective at Nike and Jordan and now at Pinsole, in engaging those consumers on the creative side? How do you think about consumer engagement from that perspective?
Well, what we're doing is we're trying to empower them. They're already very knowledgeable about product at a consumer level. So what we're doing is we're taking consumers and really turning them into creators. And the reason why I earlier said I'm a farmer is because we're placing new creative thinkers throughout the entire industry. And I think that's what our industry needs. Our industry needs better designers, not more designers. And consumers will kind of control this whole this whole industry from the perspective of, as soon as they start to understand the tools of the power that they hold from their own natural creativity, then it will start to change the landscape of brands. So right now you have major brands that are dominating the industry, but you're gonna start to see a bunch of smaller brands pop up. I'm getting more and more kids that come to me globally, not saying, hey, I wanna go work at Nike or Adidas or Jordan. They said, I wanna have my own brand. I wanna do my own product. So if you think about it from a microbrewery proposition, it's very similar. You're gonna start to see more and more smaller little entities pop up. And that groundswell will start to make a dent in this bigger economy that we currently kind of exist in. And a lot of that is just because the access to creating product is getting a lot easier. It used to be very difficult to create footwear. Now it's getting a lot simpler, as you see here on stage. But because it's getting simpler, then you're going to start to see people are going to be more empowered to feel like they can actually do it. And it's no different than, music. The music industry has been leading the way in a lot of different things where I know me growing up as a kid, that experience of listening to the radio, jumping on the bus to travel 45 minutes to an hour to go to the record store, to buy the record, buy the whole album, come back home, back on the bus, play it, realize I only wanted one song. So what was a 2-hour journey is now like 2 minutes. And so when you look at other industries, I think other industries is what's going to change our industry, because it is old and it's dated. So we look to other industries for innovation in ways they do things and processes.
That's cool. That's cool. You talk about creators, Dwayne. Sarah, you're a creator. You're the CEO of an American-made brand. You had your product just last year at the White House there on display. Talk about, as a millennial, as an executive, as someone who's creating here in the U.S., tell us more about kind of the Okabashi story, and then how do you envision your story and the engagement, the nexus of your story and consumers, and how do you kind of think about all that kind of collectively and holistically?
Well, Okabashi Brands has been manufacturing shoes out of our Beaufort factory since 1984. So I've now come in as third generation, and in some ways, I guess, fitting the stereotype of the sort of millennial CEO coming in and saying, let's take a fresh perspective. And how do we use this legacy, this heritage brand that we have, and also capabilities to sort of re-look at and renew the customer experience in direct-to-consumer, but also how we work with and collaborate with other brands and other organizations. And I think that's a wave of, we saw it earlier in sort of R2R or brand to brand. Everyone is now looking to see how they can collaborate. And for us, we've really seen that people are looking for purpose, people are looking for stories. For us, we whether it's on the women leadership, the millennial, the sustainability with our recyclability and closed loop, whether it's the local aspect, we have all these. But we realize that consumers don't just want a story that's a passive flat. They need a authentic story that they can engage with. So the narrative becomes this experience. And personalization is very important, but there needs to be some sort of sense of identity which is embedded within that personalization. It's not like this is a product that's purely you. No, might be the language that you would use, but you're still have some element of aspiration that's embedded. So for us, it's sort of how do we go and find these coalitions, and how do we across our brands talk to our consumers and have them have that experience of a locally made shoe.
Yeah, that's cool. Engagement's so key, and that's why, Jeff, when I turn to you and think about what Snap 36 does, I think it's just an expectation now when you engage digitally with a product before you purchase it, that you're going to see all aspects of the product. You're going to see the ability to see all angles. You're going to turn it around. You might even see some embedded video with someone wearing them. Tell us more about how Snap 36 is kind of leading this consumer engagement revolution on the digital side.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Where we see this going as well is when you think about the world out there and your consumers and who you are trying to get to, it's such a strange world out there because you have to build trust quickly where people have very short attention spans. So how do you do that in a quick moment, right? And how do you create an experience where knowing 60% of the selling is done before anybody even engages, whether it's a shopping cart or comes in store, for your attribution and where that actual transaction takes place. And so what we're finding out there today is people want transparency, and whether it's millennials or whether it's old people like me, I shop online a lot. I want to see, I want to look, I want to feel, I want a lot of content about that product, but I don't want it to drag on. I don't want to take a bunch of time for it. I want relevant content. I want it quickly. So from our perspective, we see a lot of companies going the video route, which is more of a broadcast, the company telling its consumers what they think is important. And then to complete that 360 journey, we're creating 360 imagery in photography, mind you, because it actually shows the craftsmanship and the workmanship of the products. It's not CGI of what the product's supposed to look like, it's the actual product. And then with having a 360 of it, the consumer can then pick it up, and they may want to look at the sole, they may want to look at the laces, they may want to look at how the tongue laps. It's an individual experience of what they're looking for. And that's where we're building purchase confidence in consumers, is trying to mimic the in-store experience online, on a mobile, on your desktop. So that's really where we're coming at it from.
Gotcha. John, we heard Jeff talk about digital photography, video as well. You know, we as an organization are moving more and more to video, and I know others in the room are as well, because that's just how consumers are consuming data and information. Is that kind of the future, or is it a kind of above all strategy when it comes to consumer engagement from a kind of a medium standpoint?
Sure. I mean, mobile right now is becoming a video-first platform, but I think most importantly, a lot of companies mistake it as a channel, and it's really a companion media that amplifies other media. And so when you're in store, I think the whole, making stores more experiential will come down to using these interactive types of contents, video, but most importantly also visual and voice search. I think it's been said like next year, over 50% of the mobile searches will either be visual based, where you snap a photo to look for what it is, or voice based. And I think video is part of the response and the dialogue that you maintain with the user, as we heard earlier, in store will be video-based content, but it has to be contextual and it has to be relevant. And so I think mobile is going to be the vehicle for doing that.
That makes a lot of sense. Dwayne, one of the things that has stuck to me, whatever the right phraseology is that you have an international student base, right? And so you get kind of a flavor of what the international consumer is thinking. And what are your students, how do they approach the design process, both through your program, but how are they going to use the creative side to express themselves to an international consumer base, if that makes sense?
Yes, I was able to understand that. Well, the reason why we have an international base is because diversity breeds innovation. And as soon as we understand that in our respective companies, then that's when change happens. When you're doing the same thing with the same people and the same demographics, you're not advancing, you're not moving forward. So it was important for us to make sure that our student selection by class is extremely diverse. We never have anyone from the same country or state in the same class. And that's on purpose, is because we want to create an environment of inclusion and creativity, and that comes from diversity. Where the diversity that we create is what is needed, not only in our industry, but I think in multiple industries around the country, because that change of thought and that fellowship, and they become learners of each other as well. And you start to breed this chain, this kinetic chain of creativity that will spill over into the way they purchase product. Because with the internet and the way things are consumed now, you can be in multiple countries and pick what you want. As a retailer or as a manufacturer, you can release a product in certain countries and people will start to chase it, right? So that becomes an actual strategic launch strategy, is to look at the international markets as an opportunity where most of that product is probably consumed from the US because they're buying it so they can have something different. But the global nature of our industry is not just on the selling of product, but it has to start with the creation of the product as well.
Absolutely. Sara, as we think about your factory in Georgia and the legacy that is Okabashi and what you're leading, how are you kind of thinking about positioning the manufacturing capability to be more responsive to consumer demand and input and all those things that we've been talking about throughout the day?
With injection molding, that's definitely a challenge of how do we go faster, and also how do we maintain that right balance of having that local impact as well, which is something that I feel very strongly about. I think that it comes down to design as well. What architectures can you create which allow an element of modularity that you can then customize, you can then be agile with. And I think that there's also been this, as well as sort of democratization of design, it's really been the same thing with technology as well. So the fact that we can mock things up and we can imagine means that naturally just the pace is going faster and you don't need to throw out the baby with the bathwater.
That's a good way to put it.
Sorry, I'm working on my sports metaphors. I've been told that I don't have enough.
I don't know if that is one, but we understand it.
I don't know which sport that is, not Olympic.
I'm not quite sure. Baby tossing, I guess. All right, Jeff, before we open it up to the broader audience, I want to kind of put this in front of you. As you think about how rapidly the supply chain is changing within footwear. So we have companies in this room that are designing via computer-assisted design, CAD programs. They're digitizing the sample process. There's not a physical sample, or there's a 3D printed sample on site. That we'll hear even more about that later today. How does Snap 36 kind of stay ahead of the curve? Are you at a position where you can even start previewing product 360 to consumers before it's even been created?
Well, not with photography, Matt, but absolutely with the CAD world. Obviously, creating the products, having CGI is excellent to be able to proof these out, prior to going to a production run. What we are seeing from our side is several of our clients putting in systems in China or at the actual manufacturing plant. So, for instance, Caleres has systems in Tennessee, in St. Louis, and in China, and they will use it to QA/QC the first run coming off a line, and then show that worldwide. So they using that as a sign-off process. So before it ever hits a container, before it hits the sea, everybody's seen the first run of it, real life product, not what it's supposed to be in a computer graphic, but the actual craftsmanship of it, and then they'll give their thumbs up and let the production run rip. So it is. I mean, the world's changing, and we're, as Wayne Gretzky, using a metaphor, we talk about, we're trying to skate to where the puck's going to be, and so we have to keep our finger on the pulse of everything out there and where it's all going.
So that's a great way to put it. With that, I've been hogging the question time, so I would welcome anyone to interject with the questions that you might have for the audience. I know we have people walking around with mics, so just raise your hand and we will get a mic to you. We got one right over here, Sarah from Keene.
Hello, my question's for the other Sarah, who we just met in real life today. And Keene also has domestic production. So have you given any thought, as we're having all these discussions about consumer-driven design and consumers being able to order online, pick up in store? I know one of the things that we've bounced around a little bit internally about our factory is, what if they order their customized shoe online and they can actually come to the factory and we can make it for them as they watch, and have sort of this safety zone where people can come and pick up their freshly made Keens hot off the line. Have you thought about doing that?
It's actually a very hot topic at the office, yes.
It's terrifying.
It is, but I think that the way that I look at it, as in sort of when I put on my consumer lens, I don't want someone to say, build me a building. And I have to sort of think, I would like someone to say, do you want the Eiffel Tower or do you want the Taj Mahal? And that I can choose something. So I think that when we think about consumer designing, it needs to be with very distinct parameters, which are then easier to plan for. In terms of our own production, we make to order. So that's how I keep my inventory lean and my green lights flashing green. So we already have a little bit of that complexity built in. And in terms of the consumers getting that sense of the factory. One thing that's so just fun and easy is something like Instagram. We have our designer regularly showing 2 shoes and having people vote which one they'd prefer to see in the fall collection. And the biggest challenge that I actually have, well, not the biggest, but one of the opportunities that I have is working with the creative team to really say that sometimes absolute perfection is not imperative, that it's okay to show 2 prototypes of a shoe and to sort of engage our audience. And I think that sort of gives us a sense of authenticity, which nowadays people want to be included in the process. They don't want everything to be exactly lined up. They want to feel that real feeling that they would if they came to visit. So we're doing an increasing amount where we're just showing short clips of the factory, how things are made, what the story is. And I think if you have an authentic story to share, it doesn't matter if the angle's not always the perfect angle.
Other
Can I
questions?
add something to that? Can I add something to that?
Yeah,
Matt?
go for it, Dwayne.
I would recommend creating more consumer engagement opportunities for your consumers that allows them to join your brand. Because if you don't let them in, they will go to who will let them in. Okay? Because they are moving fast. They're not going to wait.
So I'm Sara Block from the MPD Group. We're talking a lot about consumer experience and translating, the in-store experience online. And I'm always baffled by going into a showroom and all of the brands want to show us the shoe on the foot with the model, but then that is not translated online at all in many cases. So I'm wondering for Jeff and John, who do you think is doing a good job of that? If you have brands or retailers that are best in class, maybe not in this industry, but in others that we can learn from?
I can start. I mean, in the augmented reality visualization space, the home improvement stuff's just taken off with the recent releases of AR stuff by Google and Apple, all the brands. So IKEA were the first one where you could literally lift a desk or any piece of furniture off the page of the catalog and then hold it up in the room. Now, and then the other one is the beauty industry. If you look at Sephora and L'Oreal, in the footwear shoe space is very hard to visualize, for yourself on it. To try it on is very hard. So the innovators are it's easier to do your nails, it's easier to do watches, sunglasses. So I haven't seen it's a tough space. But Nike has done some neat stuff in the visual search space, but it's not really getting at what you're talking about. But I think it's important because I think a part of making things more experiential is the discoverability and the fun and delight of discovering new things, and part of that is being able to visualize them in better ways. And so I think it's a real opportunity. The technology is getting there now.
Yeah, I think people have always liked to see on figure, but the logistics behind it of trying to do a shoot where you've got to have the exact same size of shoes, the right model, get everything shot quickly, takes a lot of the scalability out of the process. To John's point, we're wading into the AR VR world pretty heavily, but you have to have an application that's relevant. So we're seeing a lot like the IKEAs and the Wayfarers doing, room design, which makes great sense. We're actually doing a project for Oneida Flatware and their commercial group where a restaurant owner can hold up an iPad and see a setting within his restaurant. Very relevant. I've always thought that shoes, if you could do it right, would be very relevant as well, where you could just look down, have your iPad and see them on your feet and kind of do a Tinder flip of yes and no.
You're also picking up, as someone who sells a lot of women's shoes, you'd also have to be able to change the pedicure to match.
Right. Yeah. Well, one last thing just to add to that is the good news is the consumer, like we did a lot of the first augmented reality for in the publishing industry for Sports Illustrated and a bunch of the issues, and the consumer at the time didn't know what the heck what it was. So the good news is Snapchat has trained everyone by putting the filters on people, and with Facebook's announcement this week of Messenger having the same things, the good news is the big platforms now have trained the consumer. So that's the hardest part of the new technology. So the good news is the behavior is there to be able, they know what it's like to put filters on people and try things on. So that's there, and it just needs the right technology innovator to figure out how to paint the toenails, align your feet, right middle model, and so forth.
They've been doing it for a little while with video games.
Yeah.
So you'll start to see that more, where you can create your own avatar, and the shoes become also in the game and avatared as well, where that's going to become more normal, where you can create an avatar, put your shoes on, and walk around.
That's a great point.
Kind of the poor man's way early on is if your site would support UGC, and you could encourage people to upload videos or whatnot of lifestyle, walking in them, working out in them, hiking. You know, that might be a short-term solution before a lot of this technology comes around.
We have one more question over here in the corner.
Hi, this question is probably mostly for Dwayne. I'm curious, a lot of consumers, they first discover a lot of products online, and most of their engagement with products is online. When you're, at Pencil, are kids thinking about designing sneakers with how they're going to look on Instagram in mind? And if so, is Pencil encouraging that? And then what does that actually look like? Like, what makes it a difference in the design when you're thinking about how it looks online?
No. I don't allow my kids to design anything that's actually in a store, because you don't learn anything by designing things you're familiar with. And when they leave us, I want them to be more knowledgeable about something they knew nothing about, instead of some of them come and think, oh, I'm going to design another basketball shoe or running shoe, and then I give them a baby carrier. Where I want to help them become better thinkers when they leave. And if they choose to put it on Instagram afterwards, fantastic. But in order to be better at creativity and design, you have to move beyond what you physically see on a daily basis. So a lot of times we don't even look at the industry for inspiration or insights at all. I encourage them to look at other places, understand other creatives, so you can bring in new information into our industry. Instead of looking at our industry, you're just going to repeat history. The Instagram part is interesting because we did a competition with the 210 Foundation and FN Platform, and we challenged our kids in our database to design a new shoe for 21 days straight. We received over 5,000 submissions in those 21 days, where we understood that they were quicker to respond to Instagram and a phone than the actual computer. So we got a better response of communication through those filters than the traditional responses that are normally, created from a computer perspective. But the influence of those things is still huge. I mean, it's still huge. They Instagram their experiences at the studio. We allow them to take photos of the process. We want to show the industry what's happening. We want to show consumers what's happening. When you work at large companies, a lot of the processes are secrets, so no one really gets a chance to understand how you can create. We want to try to unveil kind of how that process works to inspire more kids to understand that, oh, I could do that too. So Instagram is a huge part of that process from a sharing perspective, but not from a creating perspective, because they're only going to recreate what someone else already created. And I don't want my kids to leave like that.
All right, one more. Nico, because you worked so hard, 3D printing the shoe, we'll fit you in.
My question is also for Dwayne. So I agree completely with you how consumers want to be led in by brands. Yeah. So in your practice as teaching design, do you notice that your students are interested to design to enable customization? Because that's what I teach design as well. We both do. What I see a lot of times is that they do want to create a shoe, and it's still very much their ego. And then now if you are hired by a brand, the challenge that a brand has is, okay, how do we go about customizing? What part is our brand DNA, and what part would we like a consumer to contribute? Because otherwise you would get consumer private label, as I call it, where you can simply do anything. I always struggle a lot with how do you then teach people to essentially not so much design a shoe, but design a system that consumers can use to customize?
brands are in trouble. What I mean by that is, if you don't let them do it, they're going to do it. And you can see brands are actually releasing more and more of their brand equity, and they're getting looser with what you can do with their logos. As someone who worked at, and Tiffany knows this, that worked at Nike and Jordan, they wouldn't allow you to do anything. They were like swoosh police and Jumpman police. Now you can see Jumpmans everywhere and swooshes everywhere. Like that would have never happened a couple years ago, let alone now. So brands are starting to understand that they have to be a little bit more receptive to the ideas of the consumer, because if they don't allow them to do it, they can jump on Instagram and see a kid who spent some time with a shoe surgeon tear up their own shoe and make their version of the same shoe that they purchased. These kids are, and I call them kids because they're younger than me, but they are not gonna be denied. And if the industry continues to deny them, they'll create their own path. And design has gotten a lot easier. Well, not design, but the creation of things have gotten a lot easier. We empower them to not only just create something, to your point, create a system to make it different. You know, you forgot Sara, you mentioned inviting people in to view their shoe being made. Like, we want to help them create a system to actually show you how you can actually make your shoes, because that's who you're going to hire. You're not going to hire the spectator that's looking to see how you do it. So we want to actually create new ways of making product. We spoke about at the table, like U.S. manufacturing, the process needs to be redesigned in order for U.S. manufacturing to really work. We can't bring China here. We have to change the process. So just getting people to understand of solving a problem that most have never touched, because it's just been the way we've always done it. I love those kind of problems.
And with that, please help me in thanking our panel. We really appreciate the insights. So there you have it, Andy. I'm both captured in time at that location.
creating.
Keep farming. I love that term. And then I'm also speaking over myself. So
That just got really weird.
it got really weird. But anyway, they each really had a different perspective. You had
Yeah.
Dwayne talking about he was a farmer. I love that concept. Like,
Right.
you're a curator. You're one that's like working with your hands and getting dirty and doing it, working hard to bring together this creative process that forms a pair of shoes that somebody wants to buy. Sara's making those shoes in Georgia for the American consumer, made here in the U.S. Jeff for Snap 36 is helping the consumer engage with a product online, through digital photography.
Right.
And Dr. Puterbaugh is thinking about creative ways in social media marketing engage with that same consumer. So we kind of knitted all that together for a really unique panel.
Yeah. Well, I think part of this conversation about analog and digital is this: people come to things differently, right?
Yep.
Some people really like to be analog and aren't plugged in, and so you have to have traditional ways of reaching them, and sometimes that is just the product itself, right?
Yep.
I mean, they look at the product and it's quality or it's not, and they like it and they connect with it, or they don't, right? It's
Yeah.
the design idea or the manufacturing idea. And then there's a ton of people who are in this digital world who live it and breathe it, and that's their thing. They got their phone next to them when they sleep and wake up and everything else. So you got to engage with them on that way. And so there's a ton of ways to do it, and I think having these voices talk a little bit about how they see it and how they interact with people is really important to help people think differently. And hopefully you listening to this got something out of it that you can take back and plug into your business and make your business a little bit better.
Yeah, man, because it's, digital's here to stay, and learning how to engage with people is, whether, to your point, analog or digital, it's always a part. It's all relational, right? Whether it's a digital relationship or it's in person, and you're sitting and fitting, as they say in the industry. So it's awesome. I love the panel, and I'm glad we were able to share with our listeners.
I'm going to send you a handshake emoji right now,
Awesome.
so that it's both digital and analog at the same time.
I'll do a handshake emoji back and then hit you up with a fist bump.
Boom! Folks, thank you so much for listening to Shoe and Show. We hope you get a lot out of this. If you have ideas about topics, if you have ideas about speakers that we should have on our show to talk about the footwear industry and the business dynamics of the footwear industry and consumers, please let us know. You can hit us up. Our website is shoeandshow.com. You can find us on Twitter and Facebook. And you can also subscribe on iTunes or any of the other podcast platforms for Google, for Samsung, any other smartphone that you may have. we are everywhere. We are global. We appreciate you listening continually to us banter about things. But we do hope that you glean a couple of things for yourself. And we hope the goal of Shoe In is to make the industry stronger by having different voices talk about different topics. So until next time, on behalf of Matt Priest and myself, Andy Analog Polk, we are out.
Shoe In has been brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. For information about FDRA, visit fdra.org.